ग्लोबल स्किल डेवलपमेंट मिशन में आपका स्वागत है।
All right, I hope you had fun with your blending modes. You know, I was thinking about this too. If you're sitting there going, "Yeah, I'm messing around with the blending modes. I'm monkeying around with these guys. I'm choosing different opacities, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm really getting this." You are getting it. That's really all there is to it. This is where we get into sort of the creative side of Photoshop. And as I was alluding to in the previous exercise, the special effects aspect of Photoshop. There's no right and wrong here. There's just fun, right? You're just sort of exploring and experimenting and messing around until you get something that you think looks kind of cool or, half decent. So just so you know, here's where I wound up. Here's my stripe layer. I pulled him back to normal and about 70% or so there. Statue, I pulled him all the way back to where we had started, and I think I brought the clouds up just a little bit. I was messing around with some of the blending modes, but I decided to leave well enough alone. So that's where I wound up. But of course, you're certainly more than welcome to experiment and play and have fun. This is sort of the playground aspect of Photoshop. There's no right and wrong here, okay? All right, now I promised you that I would show you something called layer groups inside your layers panel. Now, as I've been mentioning kind of all the way along, normally what winds up happening is you wind up with a ton of layers inside your Photoshop documents, whether you're using Photoshop to build web layouts or compositions or who the heck knows. So we're going to wind up with a lot of layers. What we can do is we can start to group our layers, organize our layers into layer folders or layer groups. Okay, so we only have a small handful of layers inside our layers panel for the time being, but let me at least get you started with your layer groups so you can see how this works. Notice down at the bottom of the layers panel, we have a file folder icon, which will allow us to go and create a new layer group. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this guy. And we wind up getting a folder inside the layers panel called Group 1. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this guy because I want to rename him. I don't want to leave him named as Group 1. Once again, we're going to wind up with Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, Group 27, Group 28, and we won't remember what's what. So I'm just going to call this Group 1, and I'm going to call this, you can name it whatever the heck you want. I'm going to call this background stuff. How's that? Okay, so anything related to my background, I want to sort into this layer group. Okay? So check this out. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to take my clouds layer and I'm going to drag and drop him directly into the background stuff layer group, just like so. Okay, and I'm also going to grab my color fill my color fill layer, and I'm going to drag and drop him also into background stuff. Okay, now here's where layer groups get very interesting. So I've got my background stuff layer group. Within the layer group, I have clouds and color fill, the color fill layer, and I have a stacking order within the layer group. Okay, so in other words, I can rearrange the stacking order of the layers inside the layer group like so, and then there's an overall stacking order for the entire composition. For instance, notice my statue has disappeared. He is now behind color fill 1. Okay, so what I could do now is I could take background stuff, collapse that layer group by clicking on the little twisty arrow there to the left of the folder, and then drag and drop all of the contents of the background stuff layer group behind the statue layer. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so all I'm doing here is I'm just organizing my content. That's really all layer groups are about. Okay? Okay, cool. So I hope that makes sense for you. Now, we can go and create more layer groups if we wanted to. I'll go and create another layer group, and maybe I'll name this guy text, because maybe what we'll wind up doing is creating a series of text layers or text-related layers, and I could go and drag that towards the top of my stack of layers, if you will, inside the layers panel. You know what you could even do is you could get into creating sub-layer groups if you wanted to. I'm going to grab color fill 1 and I'll go and create another layer group. This is now a group inside of a group, if that makes sense. Okay, and what I could do is drag any of perhaps my color effects into this sort of sub-layer group. And I'll call this, as I say, color effects, like so. Okay, so you could certainly get into that. I have found in my experience, in my travels, that having any more than 2 levels worth of layer groups, and it starts to get complex. Okay, so I try to keep it to 2 levels at a maximum, for myself anyway. Okay, all right, so now, what if I want to get rid of a layer group? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my color fill layer. I'm going to pull him out of the layer group, just kind of drag him up there to tug him out of the layer group. I want to toast this color effects layer group that I've gone and created. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that he's selected, and I'm going to click on the trash can icon at the bottom of the toolbox, and that toasts the layer group and any layers that it happens to contain. So be careful. So in other words, if I grab background stuff and I tap the trash can icon at the bottom of the layers panel, all of the layers that appear inside that layer group are also going to be toasted. Okay, so watch out for that. Okay, so I hope this is working for you. What I am now going to do is show you a quick tip here, a faster method for working with your layer groups. And just like your layers, you can have as many layer groups as you want. When I'm using Photoshop to build web layouts and web-related compositions, I'm really keeping myself organized. All the header area, all the main navigation area, the body of the layout, the footer, all the way down, right? You can really keep yourself organized, which is great. But there's a faster way to work here. Give me just a second to set myself up here. I'm going to grab my two layers that appear inside the background stuff layer group, and I'm going to pull them out of the layer group just by tugging them up above the layer group like so. And I'm going to grab background stuff, and I'm also going to grab text, holding down Control or Command to select those guys simultaneously, and I will toast them simultaneously by using the trash can icon at the bottom of the layers panel. Now, let's say, for instance, I have a variety of layers that I want to go and group together. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select multiple layers here, okay? More than one layer, okay? So in my example, I'm just going to use clouds and my fill layer. You could grab additional layers if you wanted to, okay? I'm going to grab those guys, and from my keyboard, I'm simply going to press Control or Command G, and that groups all of my layers into a layer group for me just like so. And then, of course, I can go and double-click to rename this guy. So I'll go back to naming this guy background stuff. Okay, so that's a much faster way for you to work with your layer groups, and at least setting them up initially, really, I should say. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll go and grab all the layers that I want to be grouped together, Control or Command G, go and grab the next group of layers that I want to group together, Control or Command G, and I just rip all the way through my layers, getting them all organized into my layer groups. So there you go. There's your layer groups.